for joining us. I'm Carolyn McKenzie. As the holiday season takes us into 2020, there are a few stories we covered that stand out. Not only did they have an impact with you, our viewers, but they also made an impression on the journalists who brought you those stories. Some are headline grabbing, which led our newscast. Others, quieter ones that we will never forget. These are the stories we want to share with you now, brought to you by our local news anchors from across the country. We begin with a story that started as a missing persons case in northern BC and evolved into one of the largest manhunts in Canada. It spans several provinces, involving many of our news crews from across the country.
A double homicide in northern BC is attracting worldwide attention.
It began as a murder mystery. A young couple dead on the side of a remote BC highway near the Alaska border.
It's a love story that's ended tragically. It really is. It's the worst ever love story.
Just makes you wonder. I've never thought of it ever happening up and down this highway.
This sign offers the only indication something happened here on Highway 97, about 20 kilometers south of Liard Hot Springs. This is the area where police say the couple's bodies, along with their blue Chevrolet van, were found. It was just myself and the cameraman, Justin O'Kines, and we were driving for hours, sometimes at night, on a road where we were often there by ourselves. You know, those are the things that you cannot be afraid of, because you have to tell the story. If we don't go and tell the story, then who will? If we don't go and talk to the families, talk to the people in the community who are affected by this, then who will? That's our responsibility as journalists. So you can't let the fear stop you.
Then 500 kilometers away, the mystery deepens. Another body found and 2 teens missing.
We recognize that there is a possibility that these could be linked.
So why can't you give us an idea of whether or not there is a linkage? Are we talking about a potential serial killer? People in these communities have a right to know. Is there any indication that possibly the missing teens are somehow connected to the deaths of Fowler and Dees?
Are you suggesting that they're the suspects?
Potentially.
I don't know. I don't have that information.
Less than 24 hours later, suspicions confirmed. The 2 missing teens now suspects in 3 murders and on the run with a significant head start on police.
The RCMP are now considering Cam McLeod and Briar Schmigelski as suspects in the Dees Lake suspicious death and the double homicide of Lucas Fowler and China Dees.
It's frustrating because we are trying to get answers to questions the viewers are asking. We don't want to derail an investigation, but if you're going to ask Canadians to be on the lookout and you're going to ask this country to help you, then you have to give them the information so that they can do that. And had they have done that sooner, then maybe this wouldn't have dragged out for the weeks that it did. Maybe Leonard Dick would still be alive.
As word spread of the manhunt, sightings were reported across the country, first in Alberta, then Saskatchewan and Manitoba.
We had people sending us information, we were scouring social media, and you have a responsibility because everybody's wondering where they are, but we don't know if any of it's true yet. The RCMP was staying pretty tight-lipped, and as a journalist, you want to pass on information, you want to get that information out, so it was very frustrating for us because we didn't know if it was true.
The teen suspects ran out of road near the small northern Manitoba town of Gillam.
What a wild ride for people in this community. Police acting on a tip descended on the small First Nation of less than 500 people, making it the focal point for a national manhunt. Well, being on the ground in Gillam, Manitoba and in York Landing was important. It was crucial in telling the story of the hunt for these 2 men, and Canadians cared. There was this massive appetite for any information. People wanted to know that part of northern Manitoba, who was living up there, the conditions, and where these 2 fugitives could possibly be hiding out.
I'm standing on the exact spot where the 2 fugitives abandoned their vehicle and then apparently set it on fire.
And many people told us they were afraid to go out at night. They were afraid to let their children go and play outside in the daytime. And they told us that they would not feel safe again until these 2 killers were caught.
the amount of phone calls that we got on this particular story, just with people wanting to, give their 2 cents on this, or give their theory of what they think was happening, or kind of vent some anger or frustration about why they hadn't been caught.
The Canadian public was very interested in the manhunt, just any sighting of these guys, because we just didn't know where they were. They could have been anywhere. We had to confirm any sighting that came up, and there was multiple sightings.
The story dominating coverage for weeks, until finally,
we believe these are the bodies of the 2 suspects wanted in connection with the homicides in British Columbia.
I get the phone call. The bodies may have been found. I remember saying to myself, well, I'm the only TV reporter in this town. I have to capture this historic moment, the ending of this historic story on camera. So I remember trying to get onto a helicopter. I tried to get on a boat. I was flagging down locals, asking them for help. Nothing worked. And about 8-9 hours after searching for this scene, I remember passing by this marked RCMP cruiser. And I turned around and I followed him right to the scene. I captured on camera what turned out to be the last sighting of the 2 BC murder suspects in Gillam, Manitoba. It was a chilling scene. I had goosebumps.
And while the manhunt was over, so many questions remain.
Nothing can bring back any of them. What we gotta do is analyze what happened, where it all went wrong.
We have no evidence that leads us to identify what the motive was. If there was in fact a motive, it's gone with the accused.
It was a story that gripped the nation, and it put an international spotlight on small towns across Canada. There was a new twist and a new turn almost every day until the suspects' bodies were finally found. And even then, there was no real closure in the case. Certainly not for the families, who will always be left wondering why.
Every summer, Alberta braces for wildfire season. But this year, even though we had fewer blazes, more hectares burned than in years past. For several weeks, we were all captivated by what was happening in northern Alberta. One of the first big wildfires, the Chuckhead Creek Fire, forced about 5,000 people to leave the high-level area.
The high-level area is currently experiencing drought-like conditions.
Scary, and I don't know. I was thinking yesterday how, it would be okay if we get evacuated, and then it happens, and you're like freaking out.
Our crews camped out near high level for days, keeping an eye on the blaze and how close it got to town.
I remember getting the call saying they have no electricity up there and no Wi-Fi, and so they needed the truck up there so that we could actually broadcast our stories.
We spoke to evacuees who were stressed. You could tell the fire was taking a toll. But we also saw how the kindness of strangers made life easier for others.
We're taken care of, and I don't feel that anxiety over the whole situation.
For the crews up north, we were constantly watching the skies. Would there be rain? How strong was the wind? Would conditions improve? It seemed for a bit like things were going to calm down. Then, everything changed.
How to control wildfires in northern Alberta continue to rapidly grow in size.
The fires had flared up. It felt like the whole province was burning.
The last 24 hours have been an extremely challenging time for firefighters in Alberta.
The skies in Edmonton turned orange from all of the smoke. It felt surreal. Thousands more people up north were forced from their homes. Global News sent 3 crews out to different parts of the province to cover the story.
Eric and I were on the highway through that smoke for hours, where we could barely see in front of our vehicle. Like the headlights shone as far as they could, and it was like black smoke the whole way.
I was on a crew near Manning, watching water bombers flying in and out of a base camp as they tried to keep fires at bay. We could feel the urgency of the firefight, but we also talked to people who said, despite the fire, life goes on.
It is what it is. When you live next to a bush, you expect this stuff, so checking in on them.
We joined firefighters on patrol. They gave us a glimpse of their lives during that busy time, and we saw their commitment to keeping the community safe.
Basically, we've been getting up anytime, starting probably around 10 in the morning, and then
Usually go till about midnight. A couple days we went till about 2 in the morning.
Then, a couple weeks after High Level was evacuated, residents got the green light to return.
Welcome home.
There's nothing quite like standing on the highway and seeing all those cars lined up. People just couldn't wait to come home. There were welcome back signs and a Canadian flag at the fire hall. We spoke to some of the first people back, and you could tell it was the simple things they craved after weeks of uncertainty.
I can't wait to sleep in my own bed.
You never know what wildfire season is going to be like in Alberta, but you remember the people. We met politicians in small towns, firefighters, and residents from all over. And they could not have been more helpful, more open about sharing their lives with us. It's during these stressful times where you see the best in people, and that's why we love telling their stories.
When you hear about love at first sight, sometimes you think it's just something in the movies or between characters in a book. But the couple at the heart of this story was a living example of it. They had a connection right from the start.
Well, we met online on one of those good old cheesy dating sites. He saw me walk up the stairs and said he knew right then and there that that was it.
Just somebody to have that kind of openness and love, and I just don't think that's real.
It was this whirlwind romance. They got engaged. Jenny and Greg radiated such devotion to each other. But that was only one part of the story. They wanted so desperately to share the rest of their lives together, but they knew just how little time they had.
I'm just knowing I have to leave her. I can't imagine that day.
They just didn't want to wait to get to the altar because they knew they couldn't. Greg only had days left to live. He had terminal cancer.
I have the best days of my life with her. And I'm gonna have the worst day of my life with her.
Jenny and Greg invited us to their wedding. This was such a sweet gesture. As soon as the music started, there were goosebumps in that room. Greg wheeled himself down the aisle and everyone just started clapping and cheering. And then Jenny came towards him, escorted by her sons. Nobody said a word. There were a lot of tears shed, and the sentiments in their vows, it just held so much meaning. The space was beautiful. Everything was donated, from the venue to the food to the photographer. Really, anybody who was asked to be involved didn't even hesitate to say yes.
When this came up, there was no questioning if I was going to be a part of it. I had to be a part of it. We don't know how much time any of us have, and they actually have the luxury of knowing how much time they have, which puts things into perspective. Really tender and beautiful.
That's the thankfulness, is just to have that person in your life for however long or however short.
Their time together as husband and wife was too short. Exactly 1 week after their wedding day, the newlyweds said goodbye for the last time. Greg passed away surrounded by family and friends. Ever since that day, Jenny has just spent a lot of time honoring his memory. She's spreading his ashes in his favorite places in the world and doing things on his bucket list, like going to a NASCAR race in Las Vegas. It may not have had the fairy tale ending they had hoped for, but they got to share a lot of chapters together. And I felt pretty lucky to be invited in for just one day in their lives.
We have hit Homicide 42, which is the deadliest year on record for the Winnipeg Police Service.
I've never seen any other city have to deal with what we're dealing with right now.
Winnipeg police consumed by an exhausting weekend of violent crime. 2 men murdered, a teenage girl stabbed to death, and several people, including a baby, shot in a home.
We hear that we're experiencing a meth crisis. We hear that we're a city under siege.
Racing from call to call to call.
Wrapping up a Friday night the same way it started, with dozens of calls,
commercial robbery,
waiting for a police officer to respond.
The most deadly year on record was 2011, when there were 41 homicides, and we hit that number this fall following a rash of violence.
A 3-year-old boy is in grave condition tonight after an assault early this morning.
I too have kids, and you know, to see a baby laying there
that did no harm to no one really broke my heart.
We bring them those stories. We bring them what's happening in their community, and sometimes it is negative and it is heartbreaking, but I think that's when we see people come together, when they're in crisis, when they're experiencing crisis.
The girl kind of lunged at her and started try and swing at her. So I pushed her out of the way, and then the other two just jumped on me.
I'm nervous of anyone I see. I don't feel safe in this city. It's terrible.
Most of the time, I feel so scared. I feel so scared, not only for my family, but for everybody who lives in the city.
Violence, the level of property crime, it's bad.
Everything needs to almost be nailed down or it will be taken from you.
We actually had our garage broken into twice. It was taken right out of our backyard.
Through the glass at the front door there, they kicked that in.
My daughter had her bike stolen at knife point.
If it's there and they see it, it's probably gonna get taken.
While we don't have a set solution for all of Winnipeg, and we are still feeling the effects of drug addiction and subsequent crime, we are trying to find that solution, and we're trying to come together at all levels.
The city's doing as much as we can at this stage, but we need even greater supports from provincial and federal governments to make sure we're working collaboratively together, and that the supports for those that are affected by mental health addictions and families in crisis continues to grow.
Because we lead in some of society's problems in Manitoba, we should lead in finding solutions. This is what Manitoba's always been good at. Manitobans have pulled together and supported each other. Let's take the awful things that have happened this year and make them less awful by reducing the incidence of it.
I think the biggest takeaway is that it's going to take all of us.
When the story first came across my desk, I thought, this is way more than a feature.
I'm here to tell you that we have chosen you for the Design for Hope project.
Oh my God! This was such an exciting project, and from start to finish, I could see what the end was going to look like. We were going to gut this home. The family was so deserving, and there was so much to them. We wanted to make a difference for sure. And then the community and the tradespeople all came together, giving their time for free. What's better than that?
Mark and Hillary Nikolic are parents to oldest son Alex and twin boys Eric and James. The twins have autism, are nonverbal, and developmentally delayed. The severity of their symptoms resulted in extreme damage to the family home, and with Mark and Hillary's money tied up in the boys' therapy, repairs were never made.
When I first walked into the house, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe that they were living in those conditions.
There were holes on all of the walls, and I just couldn't imagine living in that sort of realm where you just plug away at life.
This is our life. We don't go out. We never been on vacation. But we just
well, there was that time we were on our honeymoon.
Yeah, that was before they were born.
I really became vested in the project when I learned more about the Nikolic story. It's frustrating and it's stressful for them, but you can see how much love they have for one another and the support they provide for each other.
It was a small team that worked on this, but we were certainly mighty, and it was 8 months of total dedication and passion.
From late summer through fall and then winter, our team followed the progress of this home redesign.
You're working with different contractors, different camera operators.
Wait, are we on schedule? Chantel, can you confirm what's happening? Where are you?
So they couldn't do that one today?
No.
Another day, another problem.
Trying to be there when stuff wasn't getting done on time and capturing those organic moments.
This was really outside my comfort zone. It was quite the undertaking while still doing your regular job.
But we're getting close. Very close.
Now the butterflies are coming out.
Then the day came to bring the Nikolics home.
When I opened that door and they came out and welcome home.
Are you ready to see your new home? Welcome home, guys.
I felt it. I was tearful. It was magical.
Wow!
It was truly one of the best things I have ever done.
Really, really, really thank you a lot from the bottom of my heart. It's going to make a whole lot of difference for our life, a whole lot.
I think one of the best moments for me was seeing Alex's face when he walked into his bedroom for the first time and had a bed.
Wow! Oh my God.
The guy hasn't had a bed since he was 4 years old. Just puts things in perspective for how responsible he has to feel for his loved ones.
Just seeing their joy and their relief at seeing their home being completely remade and made for them to help support them, like that was just a good moment.
I just think we need these stories. This is real life. This put everything in perspective, not only for me, but for the entire team here at Global that worked on it. We did a good thing this year.
We hope you enjoyed our stories, and we look forward to bringing you many more in 2020.